Chapter 20. The Blue Queen. The Toa found no immediate opposition to their presence within the cavernous inner chamber. The massive and spacious room was illuminated by the glass pipes that lined the lower corners of the walls, circulating a strange, silvery substance that glowed so brightly that Tahu had no reason to keep his sword ignited. The pipes sprouted from the green and smoothly paved stone floor and ran along into the two opposing hallways at the far end of the chamber, both of which produced faint echoes of activity.
"Which way, Lewa?"
Tahu asked.
"Both,"
Lewa replied.
"One path for each barrack. We will need to break split from here."
"Are you sure about this?"
asked Gali.
"True certain. We need to keep both the queens separated at all costs. Otherwise, this is going to be a heavy lot harder."
"So, who goes where?"
Pohatu asked.
"Is there a difference between them?"
"Scarce little. They're practically clone copies, but they each control drive a different portion of the swarms. The closer they get to each other, the mind stronger they become. Our best shot chance is to keep them divided."
"All right then,"
said Tahu.
"Kopaka will take Gali and Pohatu down the left tunnel. Onua and Lewa, you're with me. We meet back here when they've both been dealt with."
None of the Toa appeared to have any qualms about Tahu's plan. As they split into their assigned teams and started for their tunnels, they barely moved 3 steps before Lewa once again halted and pressed his hand against his mask. This time it only lasted for a few seconds before he shook the voices away and straightened himself with a newfound look of focus in his eyes.
"What are they telling you this time?"
Tahu asked. Lewa shook his head.
"They're gift granting us a final chance to turn back. It sounded a tight bit desperate if you ask me."
"It's too late for that,"
Kopaka said.
"I've already sent past that along,"
Lewa replied.
"Good,"
said Tahu.
"Now let's go. Every second we waste down here, another swarm could be reaching the surface."
Without another word, the Toa broke off into the tunnels. Kopaka drew his sword and took the lead with Gali and Pohatu walking closely behind him. Up ahead, they could hear the scampering sounds of Bohrok Va and hissing machinery accompanied by swiftly passing shadows. The Toa slowed their pace and readied their weapons. The pass down the hallway was brief, and when they reached the end, they stopped ahead of a wide ramp that led down to another large, open room, infested with Bohrok Va moving and darting purposefully in and out of compact tunnels that lined the lower half of the walls. The pipes that fed the silvery substance through the hallway followed the sides of the ramp before feeding into a circular pool that illuminated the entire space and shimmered so brightly that the Toa struggled to look directly at it. Other pipes and tubes ran across the ceiling and along every wall. But the focal point of the immense chamber was the gigantic creature that rested beside the pool in the dead center of the room. The blue and gray beast crouched next to the gleaming substance on its muscular pair of digitigrade legs, each balancing on 2 backward-facing toes. Its eyes were shut, and its triangular and blunt-snouted head was tucked downward, while its slender front limbs were folded beneath its chest. From the back of its skull sprouted 2 long and thin antennae that swayed in the air, as if they were suspended in water. Its displeasing appearance was as reptilian as it was insectoid.
"That must be one of the queens,"
Pohatu said in a hushed tone.
"I'm not sure what I had in mind, but she's about as ugly as I expected."
more or less,
Kopaka replied. He activated the scope lens on his Kanohi Akaku to study the scene further.
"It looks like she's sleeping,"
said Gali.
"We may be able to catch her by surprise."
"What's that stuff in the pool?"
Pohatu asked, squinting as he looked toward it.
"It looks important."
The Toa observed the creature in silence as they waited for her to make a move. A moment passed before a previously unnoticed trapdoor on the other side of the pool suddenly hissed open and produced a metal container. 2 Bohrok Va skittered toward it and pried it open, one of which carried a long, hooked stick. The Toa watched in shock and horror as the Bohrok Va pulled out a Komatoran body devoid of a Kanohi. By the look of his black and vacant brainstalk, he was already long dead. One of the Bohrok Va propped the body upright while the other secured the hook around his neck.
What are they doing to him?
Gali asked in disgust. The Bohrok Va dragged the body toward the pool and pushed it over the side while maintaining its grip on the tool. A surge of energy snapped through the convulsing corpse before it sank into the glowing liquid. The other creature rushed around to the queen and parked itself beneath her bulbous and barbed tail-like abdomen. The queen inhaled deeply as she shuffled her large body uncomfortably.
No!
Gali gasped as the realization of what they were witnessing began to set in. The Bohrok Va with the hook pulled it from the pool. What came out was no longer a Matoran, but a fully formed Korak. The Bohrok Va unhooked its neck and let it slump to the floor. Just as it did so, the queen twitched her talons and produced a Krana into the claws of the Bohrok Va beneath. The small creature inspected it for defects before scurrying back to the freshly born Bohrok and placing the Krana inside its headplate. The Bohrok sprung to life and scanned its surroundings while the Bohrok Va led it into one of the tunnel vents to join the rest of the swarm. After they departed, the queen exhaled and returned to her previous position, with her head drooping slightly lower than last time.
This can't be right.
Pohatu said in denial.
We haven't been fighting dead Matoran this entire time. Something isn't adding up.
I don't understand,
added Gali.
We don't have to understand.
Kopaka said as he deactivated the scope on his mask.
We've seen enough to know this ends now.
The Toa rushed down the ramp with their weapons ready. Before they were noticed, the trapdoor opened again and produced another vessel. Kopaka announced their presence by firing an ice spear into one of the Bohrok Va that came to open it. The Barag pulled back and stiffened her antennae as she flashed open her 6 hellish red eyes toward the 3 Toa that surrounded her. She flared her nostrils and snapped her curving teeth, which clamped shut in a slight overbite. She raised her sinewy arms and brandished her hooked claws, revealing a 3rd, smaller pair of clawed limbs that hung from her chest. She carefully studied each Toa as her eyes blinked individually. When she concluded her inspection, she reared back with a powerful roar and goaded the Toa to make the first move. The Toa pounced simultaneously, with Kopaka reaching her first. She swatted his blade away just in time to deflect a blow from Pohatu's headplate gauntlets and Gali's hooks in a single fluid motion. Pohatu quickly recovered and followed up with another blow, but missed when the Barag shifted her body from its path. She pulled her neck out of range of Kopaka's overhead swing before ramming her head into Gali and sending the Toa of water sliding across the floor. Pohatu stomped the ground and conjured a boulder, which he smashed against the side of the queen's armored body. She responded with a growl of annoyance just before slamming him to the ground with a sweep of her hefty abdomen. Kopaka made a charge for her legs, but the Barag backed away and swiped her bladed talons toward him. Kopaka blocked the attack and countered with a strike of his own. The queen grabbed his blade and redirected it toward the ground before snapping her jaws toward him. Kopaka raised his shield to block the chomp, but allowed her to secure a grip onto it and lift him off the ground. With a flick of her neck, she flung the Toa of ice into the air with his shield flying in a separate direction. Kopaka tumbled straight toward the silvery liquid. He rolled onto his feet just in time to feel them slipping over the edge of the pool. He was saved only by Gali's quick reflexes when she grabbed his wrist as he was inches from falling in. She shifted her weight back to prevent them both from toppling into the substance before yanking him to safety. After they staggered back into upright positions, Kopaka responded with a grateful nod. Meanwhile, Pohatu battled the Barag alone. She dodged the first of his reinforced punches before he leapt up and landed a weighty blow to her jaw with the second one. He immediately followed up with a spinning kick, but she caught his ankle between her teeth and stamped a crater into the ground with his body before tossing him away. Kopaka struck the side of the Bohrok's face with an ice spear. She shook off the blow just in time to evade a swipe of Gali's hooks. When Gali spun back around to reset, the queen was surrounded by all 3 Toa. As they all attacked at once, she was forced to make a snap decision and focus on Pohatu. She charged forward and rammed him onto the floor. Kopaka flanked her from the side with a strike to her abdomen, but failed to pierce the armor. She whipped around and swiped her claws toward the Toa of ice. His sword prevented her talons from tearing into his body, but was unable to stop him from being launched across the room. The Bohrok turned her focus to Gali and bore down on her with a barrage of swipes and chomps, all of which Gali narrowly evaded as she weaved and flowed around them. Gali ducked under a sweeping talon and blasted a jet of water into the queen's face. She increased the intensity, causing the Bohrok to stagger backward as she threw her claws over her face. Gali refused to let up on the attack, until the queen spat out a fireball that pounded into her chest and knocked her to the ground. The queen roared triumphantly, but was cut short when Pohatu crashed into her skull with his Kanohi Kakama active. The stunned Bohrok was nearly knocked off her feet, but regained her footing just as Pohatu turned back for another attack. She caught the headplate gauntlet between her teeth and jerked it away from the Toa's grip. She spat it onto the ground before stomping it into a flattened mess. With his one headplate gauntlet remaining, Pohatu hastily blocked another swipe of her claws before responding with another punch. She swatted the blow away and knocked him to the ground. All 3 Toa were left sprawled across the floor. The Bohrok rolled the stunned Toa of stone onto his back and pressed her foot down onto his chest. She reared her head back, preparing for the finishing blow, but was interrupted when Gali leaped onto the back of her neck and hooked onto her upper jaw. The Bohrok spat a short stream of ice from her mouth as her head was involuntarily jerked back. Gali steered the queen until she removed her foot from Pohatu's chest. Pohatu rolled onto his feet and rushed to Gali's aid. He used the fangs on his remaining headplate gauntlet to rip into the Bohrok's exposed neck. Gali leaped off her back as she thrashed and roared as she cupped her throat, coughing out showers of corrosive acid that ate into the floor. The Toa dodged the spray while the Bohrok quickly recovered. She retaliated by snapping her jaws toward Pohatu. While she was distracted, Kopaka rushed between her legs and sliced across her inner thigh. The Bohrok shrieked in pain as she fell to the ground for the first time since the fight began. Kopaka dove to the side to evade her body as it crashed against the floor. She thrashed and kicked as she failed to stand back up. Gali ducked beneath one of the wild swings of her claws and drove one of her hooks into the queen's shoulder. She batted the Toa of water away, groaning in discomfort as the hook was pulled out. When Gali climbed back to her feet, all 3 of them inched toward the downed Bohrok, careful not to catch a stray claw or abdomen swipe. Before they could make their next move, she buried her claws into the floor, generating an earthquake that split the pavement. The Toa were once again thrown to the ground as the Bohrok stumbled back upright. Following a final roar of defiance, the giant beast retreated up the ramp and stomped away through the hallway, crying out for her sister. The Toa helped each other up and shook the dust from their bodies. Kopaka retrieved his shield from the ground, while Pohatu inspected the wrecked mess of smashed metal that was once one of his headplate gauntlets. He looked down at the one he still held before removing it in revulsion now that he knew where it came from. The earthquake that the Bohrok generated had caused much of the glowing silver substance to splash across the floor, just a few feet from the Toa, and coated the body of the Bohrok Va that Kopaka had speared. To their surprise, all traces of the small creature were completely vaporized, filling their minds with even more questions. Questions they would have to save for later.
Remember what Lewa told us.
Gali reminded the others.
We can't let her reach the other queen. Let's go.